Singapore residential status and taxability of individuals. Singapore tax residential status. If any of the following conditions are satisfied, then the individual is regarded as a tax resident for a particular year of assessment. Singapore citizen or Singapore permanent resident, SPR, who normally resides in Singapore except for temporary absences, or foreigner who has stayed or worked in Singapore for at least 183 days in the previous calendar year, or continuously for 3 consecutive years, or foreigner who has worked in Singapore for a continuous period straddling 2 calendar years and whose total period of stay, including physical presence immediately before and after the employment, is at least 183 days. This applies to foreign employees who entered Singapore, but excludes directors of a company, public entertainers, or professionals. Number of days of employment in Singapore includes weekends and public holidays. Any absences from Singapore that are temporary, example, overseas vacation leave, or incidental to employment, for example, business trips, are still counted in the total days of employment for the purpose of determining the tax residency status. Foreigners issued with a work pass that is valid for at least 1 year will be treated as a tax resident upfront. However, the tax residency status will be reviewed at the point of tax clearance at the cessation of the employment based on the tax residency rules. In case the total stay in Singapore is less than 183 days, then the individual will be regarded as a non-resident. A non-resident of Singapore for tax purposes is an individual who does not qualify as a tax resident of Singapore. The tax residency status of the employee in Singapore would not necessarily impact the taxability of the income. It will, however, determine the rate of tax applicable on the Singapore-sourced income chargeable to tax. Employee versus self-employed. Employee works under a contract of service and under the control of an employer as to how, when and where to work. Usually not in the position to realize a business profit or loss. Self-employed works under a contract for service to carry out an assignment or project as an independent contractor for a fee. Do not have anyone overseeing the work and have the liberty to carry out work in own style. Gig works, independent consultants, coaches, online graphic designer, freelance delivery riders are generally self-employed. Self-employed persons and individual partners. Business income is income derived from carrying on a trade, business, profession, or a vocation. Business income is taxable in the sole proprietor's, partner's, or self-employed person's name. It is added to all other personal income. The total is then subject to personal income tax rates. The sole proprietor, partner, or self-employed person who receives this income must report the income in his individual income tax return. All self-employed partners of a partnership, including the precedent partner, must file and report their share of the partnership income as part of their total personal income in Form B1. Overseas employment income. Overseas employment income received in Singapore on or after the 1st of January 2004 is not taxable. These include overseas income paid into a Singapore bank account. Overseas employment income is taxable if the overseas employment is incidental to the Singapore employment. Working in Singapore for a foreign employer. Overseas employment income is for services rendered in Singapore. The income is received in Singapore through a partnership in Singapore, unless the income qualifies for exemption. Employed outside of Singapore on behalf of the Government of Singapore. Shipping industry crew members. Employment income derived by crew who are employed on Singapore-registered ships, which ply in international waters, and are not based on shore for frequently boarding, sailing with ships for inspection, and other purposes, are exempted from Singapore income tax. This exemption applies to seafarers or crew, regardless of whether they are Singapore citizens, SPRs or foreigners. This exemption doesn't apply on crew members who are employed on foreign-registered ships that are owned by Singapore companies. Tax treatment for individuals. As per the below table, tax treatment for tax-resident individual, all income earned in Singapore shall be taxable. Deductions on expenses and donations to save tax can be claimed. The net income is subject to income tax at progressive rates ranging from 0% to 22%. Any foreign-sourced income, except for those received through partnerships in Singapore, brought into Singapore shall be exempted from taxation. Tax treatment for non-resident individual in Singapore for 61 to 182 days in a year. All income earned in Singapore shall be taxable. Deductions on expenses and donations to save tax can be claimed. However, you are not eligible to claim personal reliefs. Your employment income is taxed at the higher of flat rate of 15% or the progressive resident tax rate. Directors' fees, consultants' fees and all other income are generally taxed at 22%. Short-term employment, less than 60 days, for non-resident is exempt from tax. This rule does not apply for directors, public entertainers, or a professional in Singapore, or if the absences from Singapore are incidental to the Singapore employment. In this case, the total income, including income for services rendered outside Singapore, is fully taxable in Singapore. Tax filing requirement. Generally, income tax return is required to be submitted if in the preceding calendar year total income is more than $22,000, or self-employed income with a net profit is more than $6,000, or a non-resident who derived income from Singapore. As individuals who receive a letter or SMS informing you that they have been selected for No Filing Service (NFS) are not required to file an income tax return. Self-employed persons, SEPs, with effect from YA 2021, may be selected for NFS if they are under the pre-filling scheme for SEPs with commission income of $50,000 and below, and or derived driving income as a private hire car or taxi driver for previous and current YA. Income tax returns are due on the 18th of April and the 15th of April based on e-filing and paper filing respectively. Non-residents who derived income from Singapore in the preceding year are required to file an income tax return, regardless of how much you earned in the previous year.